Princess Lyra had been dying for 3 weeks now. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone knew. Her personal guard, Commander Voss, watched her growing weaker each day, her violet skin turning pale gray, her movements becoming slower and more painful. The finest doctors in the Velkari Empire had tried everything. Nothing worked. The problem was simple but impossible to fix. Lyra's species needed a specific compound in their food to survive. For thousands of years, they'd gotten it naturally from plants on their homeworld. Then civilization advanced. They'd synthesized everything, made it efficient, turned meals into nutrient tablets you could swallow in seconds. Perfect nutrition, zero waste, maximum efficiency. Except Lyra had a genetic mutation. Rare, 1 in 50 million. Her body rejected the synthetic compound completely. It was like trying to run a machine on the wrong fuel. At first, the doctors weren't worried. They'd just feed her the natural foods, the old way. Problem solved. But those plants were extinct. Gone for 200 years. The Empire had optimized them out of existence. Voss made a decision that could get him executed. He bundled the princess onto an unmarked transport and headed for Frontier Station, a lawless trading post on the edge of known space. If there was any place in the galaxy with biological diversity, with strange foods and weird compounds, it was there. It was a long shot. But it was the only shot they had. Meanwhile, Danny Torres was having a perfectly ordinary evening in his repair shop on the station's lower docks. He'd just finished patching up a cargo hauler's failing engine, collected his credits, and decided to treat himself to a proper meal. Not the protein paste from the station cafeteria. Real food. Danny lived in his workshop, a cramped space that smelled like engine oil and welding fumes. Most mechanics on the station were drifters, but Danny had been here 5 years now. Ever since his mom passed, he hadn't seen much point in going anywhere else. The shop had become his home. And every Friday night, he did the same thing. He pulled out a battered metal pot, set it on a small heating element, and cooked his mom's beef stew. She'd taught him the recipe when he was 10. Not from a datapad or a video. She'd stood next to him in their tiny kitchen back on Earth, guiding his hands, teaching him how to brown the meat just right, when to add the vegetables, how to know by smell when it was perfect. It wasn't about following instructions. It was about feeling it. Danny chopped carrots and potatoes, humming an old song his mom used to play. The meat was sizzling now, filling his workshop with rich, savory smoke. He added beef stock, tomato paste, a splash of red wine he traded for last week, and his secret ingredient, a dash of Worcester sauce his mom swore by. The smell was incredible. Warm. Comforting. Like home. He turned down the heat and let it simmer. Another hour and it'd be perfect. Down in the docking bay, Lyra couldn't walk anymore. Voss was carrying her, trying not to panic. They'd been to 3 doctors on the station already. All of them took one look at her biology and shook their heads. Alien physiology too different. Too risky. One had suggested she find a temple and make peace with her gods. Lyra's vision was blurring. Her body was shutting down, conserving energy for vital systems only. She'd accepted it now. This was how it ended. Far from home, in a grimy station that smelled like fuel and recycled air. Then something changed. A scent drifted through the corridor. Lyra's eyes snapped open. Her whole body responded, something primal and desperate surging through her. She couldn't describe it. Rich, complex, warm. Every cell in her body screamed for it. Wait, she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. That smell. Voss stopped. What smell? Your Highness, we need to get you to. No. Lyra pushed against him weakly. Follow it. Please. Voss had been her guard for 12 years. He knew better than to question that tone. He followed her pointing finger down a side corridor, past maintenance tubes and storage units, until they reached a small workshop with its door half open. Inside, a human male was stirring something in a pot, completely oblivious to them. Lyra lurched forward with strength she shouldn't have had. Voss caught her before she collapsed, but she was clawing toward the doorway, her eyes fixed on that pot with desperate hunger. Danny turned around and nearly dropped his spoon. An alien woman, clearly sick, was being held back by a massive armored guard. Both looked at him like he was holding the secret to the universe. Please, Lyra whispered, her voice cracking. That food. I need it. Danny looked at his stew, then back at the dying alien princess. He didn't know who she was. Didn't know anything about her. But his mom had taught him something else besides cooking. You don't let people go hungry. Not if you can help it. He grabbed a clean bowl, ladled in a generous portion, and offered it to her. Lyra took the bowl with shaking hands. She lifted a spoonful to her lips, blew on it gently, and tasted it. Everything changed. Lyra's body responded immediately. The warmth spread through her chest, a sensation she'd almost forgotten. Her hands stopped shaking. The gray tint in her skin began to fade, just slightly. She took another spoonful, then another, eating faster now, tears streaming down her face. Voss stared in disbelief. In 3 weeks, nothing had worked. Nothing. And now this human simple meal was bringing her back from the edge. Danny stood there awkwardly, still holding his spoon. You want some bread with that? I got some rolls in the cooler. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes clearer than they'd been in days. What is this? What did you give me? It's just beef stew, Danny said, shrugging. My mom's recipe. Nothing fancy. Just? Lyra laughed, a sound mixed with crying. This is saving my life. Within 6 hours, Danny's workshop was swarming with Velkari scientists. They'd set up portable labs, scanners, analyzers, everything they could fit into the small space. Danny had been pushed to the corner of his own shop, watching these aliens poke and prod his dinner like it was some kind of alien artifact. Lead scientist Rel held up a scanner, reading the results with growing frustration. Impossible. The compound is there. Chemically identical to what we need. But somehow different. The molecular structure has variations we can't explain. Let me see that, another scientist said, grabbing the device. She scanned the stew again, then scanned the raw ingredients Danny had left on the counter. The beef itself doesn't have it. Neither do the vegetables. It's only appearing in the cooked mixture. Rel punched commands into his datapad. Fine. We'll replicate it exactly. Same ingredients, same proportions, same cooking temperature and duration. He turned to Danny. Human, provide us with precise measurements. Danny scratched his head. I don't really measure. I just kinda make it. That's unacceptable. We need exact data. Look, man, I don't know what to tell you. A handful of this, a pinch of that. You cook until it smells right. The scientists exchanged glances. One of them muttered something in their language that sounded like a curse. But they tried anyway. They measured everything Danny had used, calculated the temperature, timed the cooking process down to the second. They synthesized it in a sterile container using their technology. Lyra tried it. She took one bite and immediately pushed it away. No. It's wrong. It tastes similar, but my body knows. It's not the same. They tried again. And again. 5 attempts, each one more precisely calibrated than the last. Each one failed. Lyra's body would accept Danny's cooking but rejected everything they made, even when they used the exact same ingredients. This makes no scientific sense, Rel snapped, his frustration boiling over. It's the same compounds, the same ratios. Why does her body only accept his version? Danny had been watching this circus for hours. Finally, he spoke up. Maybe that's your problem right there. You're trying to make it make sense. What's that supposed to mean? Cooking isn't science. I mean, yeah, there's chemistry and whatever, but that's not the point. Danny walked over to his pot, still simmering on low heat. My mom taught me this recipe over years. Not in one day. She'd show me how to tell when the meat was browned right by looking at it, listening to it sizzle. How to know the stew was done by smelling it, not by setting a timer. He stirred the pot slowly. Every time I make this, it's a little different. Sometimes the carrots are sweeter, sometimes the beef is tougher and needs more time. Sometimes the station's humidity is off and it affects how things cook. I adjust. I feel it out. That's what cooking is. Lyra had been listening quietly. She stood up, still weak but stronger than before. May I try? Try what? To learn. To cook with you. Voss stepped forward immediately. Your Highness, that's not appropriate. You're still recovering. Commander, I'm recovering because of this food. If they can't replicate it, then I need to learn how to make it myself. She looked at Danny hopefully. Would you teach me? Danny glanced at the scientists, at the armed guard, at this alien princess who'd stumbled into his life an hour ago. This was crazy. This whole situation was insane. But she reminded him of himself, years ago, standing in that kitchen with his mom. Wanting to learn. Wanting to understand. Yeah, okay, he said. But you gotta understand, it's not quick. It takes time. I have time now, Lyra said softly. Thanks to you. Over the next few days, Danny taught Lyra to cook. Not just the stew, but other things too. His mom's meatloaf, which Lyra's body also accepted. Her chicken soup. Her chili that Danny had modified to be less spicy but just as flavorful. The scientist stayed, taking notes, trying to quantify what couldn't be quantified. But Danny ignored them. He focused on Lyra, showing her how to dice onions properly, how to season by taste instead of measurement, how to trust her instincts. Your people turned food into fuel, Danny said one evening as they cooked together. Efficient, sure. But you lost something. Food isn't just about staying alive. It's about living. Lyra stirred the pot, copying his movements. We thought we were advancing. Optimization. Efficiency. Maximum output. Yeah, well, sometimes the old ways exist for a reason. Danny tasted the sauce, nodded approvingly. My mom used to say cooking was an act of love. You're putting time, attention, care into something just to make another person happy. To nourish them. You can't synthesize that in a lab. Lyra looked at him, really looked at him. This human with his grimy workshop and simple tools had saved not just her life, but had shown her something her entire advanced civilization had forgotten. That some things shouldn't be optimized. Some things should just be felt. News traveled fast in the Velkari Empire. Princess Lyra was alive. She'd been days from death, and now she was recovering. The entire royal court was buzzing with the story. And with that buzz came something darker. Opportunity. Lord Crane had been positioning himself for the throne for years. He was Lyra's cousin, third in line, and he'd been very quietly making alliances, building support, waiting for his moment. When Lyra got sick, he'd seen his chance. Just a few more days and she'd be gone. The succession would be contested. In the chaos, he could make his move. But now she was eating. Getting stronger. All because of some random human on a nowhere station. Crane sat in his private chambers, reading the reports his spies had sent him. The human's name was Danny Torres. A mechanic. Nobody important. Nobody protected. And apparently, the only person in the galaxy who could keep Lyra alive. The solution was obvious. Back on Frontier Station, Danny was teaching Lyra how to make cornbread. She'd been staying in his workshop for almost 2 weeks now. Voss had wanted to move her to secure quarters, but she'd refused. She needed to be here, learning, cooking. Her recovery depended on it. Okay, so you don't want to overmix it, Danny explained, showing her how to fold the batter gently. See? Just until it's combined. If you work it too much, it gets tough. Lyra mimicked his movements, concentrating hard. Her hands were steadier now. The color had fully returned to her skin. She looked healthy. Alive. I've been thinking, she said quietly. When I return home, I'll need to continue eating this way. But I can't stay here forever. Danny had been trying not to think about that. Yeah, I know. We'll figure something out. Maybe I can teach some of your people, the ones who actually want to learn, not just analyze everything. Would you come with me? To the capital? Danny froze, the mixing bowl still in his hands. Come with you? Like, leave the station? I would make sure you're compensated. Anything you want. A proper kitchen, the finest ingredients, access to anything you need. That's not really the point, Danny said slowly. This is my home. My shop. I can't just abandon it. Before Lyra could respond, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red. Voss was on his feet immediately, weapon drawn. Stay down. An explosion rocked the docking bay outside. Danny heard screaming, the sound of weapon fire. Voss moved to the door, his armor shields activating. What's happening? Lyra demanded. Assassins, Voss said grimly, checking his weapon's charge. They've breached the lower docks. 3 signatures, moving fast. They're coming here. Danny's heart was racing. This wasn't his world. He fixed ships. He cooked dinner. He didn't deal with assassins and political intrigue. But these people were coming to his workshop. His home. He grabbed a heavy wrench from his workbench. It wasn't much, but it was something. Human, stay back, Voss ordered. I'll handle this. The door exploded inward. Voss returned fire immediately, his energy weapon lighting up the darkness. 2 figures in black armor rolled through the smoke, moving with trained precision. They weren't here for a fight. They were here for an execution. One of them spotted Lyra and raised a weapon. Some kind of rifle, sleek and deadly. Danny didn't think. He just moved. He threw himself in front of Lyra, putting his body between her and the assassin. The blast hit him square in the chest, and the world turned into white-hot pain. He felt himself falling, heard Lyra screaming his name, heard Voss roaring in fury. The next few minutes were chaos. Voss fought like a demon, taking down both assassins while a third fled. Station security finally arrived, too late as usual. Medics rushed in, scanning Danny with equipment he didn't recognize. Danny couldn't breathe right. Everything hurt. But through the pain, he heard Lyra's voice, desperate and terrified. "Don't you dare die. Don't you dare." He woke up in a medical bay 12 hours later. His chest was wrapped in some kind of healing gel that tingled against his skin. Lyra was sitting beside him, her eyes red from crying. Voss stood at the door, looking like he hadn't slept. "You're an idiot," Lyra said, her voice shaking. "A brave, selfless idiot." "Did we get them?" Danny croaked. "Voss killed 2. The third escaped. We know who sent them." Before Danny could ask more questions, the door opened. Several Velkari officials entered, their expressions serious. The lead one, an elderly female with elaborate robes, spoke with authority. "Mr. Torres, the Empire owes you a debt. You saved our princess's life twice now. We would like to offer you a position. Royal Chef. You would live in the palace, have every resource at your disposal, and ensure Princess Lyra's continued health." Danny looked at Lyra. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "And if I say no?" he asked. The official's expression didn't change. "The princess's life depends on your cooking. We cannot allow you to refuse. For her safety, and the stability of the Empire, we must insist." There it was. Dressed up in pretty words, but Danny understood. They were going to make him a prisoner. Lock him in a golden cage and force him to cook for the rest of his life. Lyra finally looked at him, and he saw the conflict in her eyes. She knew what they were doing. And she hated it. "No," Lyra said suddenly, standing up. "Absolutely not." The officials looked shocked. "Your Highness, your life." "My life is my own responsibility. And what you're suggesting would destroy the very thing that makes his food work." She turned to Danny. "You taught me that cooking requires freedom. Choice. Love. If you force him, if you cage him, that's gone. And I won't be party to that." Danny smiled despite the pain. "I got a better idea," he said. "How about I teach other people? Real people. Not scientists trying to measure everything. Actual cooks who want to learn." The officials looked uncertain. But Lyra's eyes lit up. "A school," she breathed. "A human cooking school." "Yeah," Danny said. "That could work." 3 months later, Danny stood in front of a building on Lyra's homeworld that still didn't feel real. The Velkari had built it fast, efficiently, like they built everything. But Danny had insisted on certain changes. A proper kitchen. Multiple cooking stations. Real ovens, not synthesizers. Storage for fresh ingredients. The sign above the door read Torres Culinary Institute, in both English and Velkari script. Danny had argued against using his name, but Lyra insisted. "You started this revolution," she'd said. "Own it." Revolution felt like a strong word. But looking at the crowd gathered outside, Danny was starting to think she might be right. He'd put out a call across Earth. Not for scientists or nutritionists. For cooks. Real, experienced cooks who understood that food was more than fuel. The response had been overwhelming. Rita came from New Orleans, bringing recipes her grandmother had taught her. Slow-cooked jambalaya, gumbo that took 2 days to make properly, bayonets that melted in your mouth. She was 60 years old, had run a restaurant for 30 years, and wasn't impressed by alien technology one bit. Chen arrived from San Francisco with his wok and a stubborn insistence that fire temperature was an art, not a science. His family had been cooking Chinese food for 5 generations. He knew techniques that had been passed down for centuries. Paolo flew in from Naples, carrying his sourdough starter in a temperature-controlled container like it was his child. He'd been making pizza since he was 8 years old, learning in his father's pizzeria. He took one look at the Velkari's efficient food labs and laughed. "You people forgot how to eat," he said. There was Keisha from Atlanta, bringing her soul food. Miguel from Mexico City with his family's mole recipe that used 37 ingredients. Yuki from Osaka, insisting they needed proper rice cookers, not machines. A dozen others, each one bringing their culture's food traditions. The first day was chaos. The Velkari students didn't understand why they couldn't just input recipes into computers and follow them exactly. They got frustrated when measurements were to taste or until it feels right. They wanted formulas, precision, data. Danny watched Rita deal with a particularly stubborn student who kept trying to measure the spices in her jambalaya exactly. "Baby, you're thinking too hard," Rita said, gently taking the measuring spoons away. "Taste it. What's it missing?" "I don't know. The formula says." "Forget the formula. Trust your tongue. Is it too bland? Does it need more kick? More depth?" The student looked genuinely distressed. "But how do I know?" "By trying. By making mistakes. By learning." Rita smiled warmly. "You think my grandma taught me with measurements? She taught me with love and patience and a wooden spoon that smacked my hand when I rushed things." Slowly, painfully, the students began to understand. But the real change happened when the food started reaching beyond the school. Lyra had insisted on one rule: every evening, the school would serve a communal meal. Not just for students, but for anyone who wanted to come. Free. Open to all. The first week, maybe 30 people showed up, mostly out of curiosity. They ate Paolo's pizza, Rita's gumbo, Chen's dumplings. They sat at long tables Danny had insisted on, instead of the Valkyries' usual individual eating stations. The second week, 200 people came. By the end of the month, they had to open up the courtyard to fit everyone. Danny watched it happen with growing amazement. Valkyrie who'd spent their whole lives eating nutrient tablets in silence were now lingering over meals for hours. They talked. They laughed. They shared food from each other's plates. Families came together. Strangers became friends. One evening, Danny saw an elderly Valkyrie woman crying quietly as she ate Yuki's miso soup. He approached carefully. "Is something wrong? Is the food okay?" She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "I'm 300 years old," she whispered. "And I just remembered what joy tastes like. We had this once, you know. Before we optimized everything. Before efficiency became our god. We used to gather for meals. We used to cook for each other." She clutched his hand with surprising strength. "Thank you for giving it back to us." The movement spread beyond the school. Restaurants started opening, real ones with human chefs teaching Valkyrie apprentices. Markets appeared, selling fresh produce instead of synthetic compounds. People started cooking at home again, something that hadn't happened in generations. The empire's productivity dipped by 3%. Economic analysts panicked. But something else happened too. Depression rates dropped. Social connection increased. People reported being happier, healthier, more fulfilled. Lord Crane tried one more time to discredit the school, calling it a waste of resources, a step backward for civilization. He held a press conference, arguing that the empire needed efficiency, not sentiment. Lyra held her own press conference the next day. She stood in the school's kitchen, surrounded by students and teachers, and she cooked. On live broadcast, watched by billions across the empire, she made Danny's beef stew from scratch. "My cousin says this is primitive," she said, stirring the pot. "That we're regressing. But I was dying, and all our advanced medicine couldn't save me. This simple human meal did. Not because of what's in it, but because of how it's made. With time. With care. With love." She ladled the stew into bowls and served it to students at the table. "We didn't lose efficiency when we lost this. We lost our humanity. Different species, yes, but the principle is the same. We stopped nourishing our souls along with our bodies." The broadcast went viral. Crane's support collapsed overnight. 6 months after opening, Danny stood in the kitchen late one night, cleaning up after the evening meal. Chen found him there, scrubbing a pot. "You know what you did, right?" Chen said, leaning against the counter. "Made some food. You changed an entire civilization. With a cooking pot and your mom's recipes." Danny thought about his mom, wished she could see this. She'd always said food brought people together. Turned out she was right on a galactic scale. "We all did it," Danny said. "Every chef here. Every student who's learning." "Sure," Chen agreed. "But you started it. You showed them that the best things in life can't be optimized or rushed. They have to be felt." Outside, Danny could hear laughter from the courtyard. Valkyrie and humans, sharing a meal together. Building something new from something very, very old. Maybe revolution was the right word after all. Danny had been on Velkar for almost a year when he finally admitted he was homesick. Not for Earth, exactly. He'd left there years ago. But for his workshop. For the smell of engine grease mixed with whatever he was cooking. For the chaotic noise of Frontier Station, where a dozen species argued in a dozen languages over docking fees and cargo rates. The school was thriving. Rita had taken over as head instructor, running the place with the same firm kindness she'd used in her New Orleans restaurant for 3 decades. The students didn't need Danny anymore. They had a dozen master chefs now, teaching everything from Italian pasta to Ethiopian injera. Lyra found him on the roof one evening, watching the sunset over the Valkyrie capital. The city had changed too. Street vendors sold fresh food now. The air smelled like cooking instead of sterile recycled atmosphere. "You're leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Danny admitted. "It's time. You don't need me here anymore. I'll always need you." She paused, then laughed. "That sounded more dramatic than I meant. I mean, you're my friend. But you're right. The school runs itself now. And you look miserable." "I don't look miserable. Danny, you've been reorganizing the same spice rack for 3 days. You're bored. You miss your tiny, oil-stained workshop." He couldn't argue with that. 2 weeks later, Danny's ship docked at Frontier Station. He'd expected nothing to change. The station had been the same grimy, chaotic trading post for 50 years. Why would it be different now? But walking through the corridors, he noticed something odd. Smells. Real cooking smells. He passed a small restaurant that hadn't existed before. Through the window, he saw a KRYNN chef teaching a young Valkyrie how to properly sear meat. His workshop was exactly as he'd left it, thanks to Voss who'd made sure nobody touched it. Danny dropped his bag and just stood there for a minute, breathing it in. Home. He fired up his cooking station that first evening, making his mom's beef stew out of habit. The smell drifted through the vents like it always did. 20 minutes later, someone knocked on his door. Danny opened it to find a Valkyrie trader, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry to bother you. I heard you were back. My ship's engine needs work, but also, is that your stew? I had it once at the school. My daughter learned to make it, but she's not here, and I just..." Danny smiled. "Come on in. I made plenty." The next evening, 3 more aliens showed up. Word spread fast on the station. By the end of the week, Danny had a line outside his door every night. He'd cook whatever he felt like making, and whoever showed up got fed. Sometimes 5 people, sometimes 20. He had to hire help eventually. A young human kid named Billy, fresh off a transport from Earth, looking for work. Danny taught him the basics, the same way his mom had taught him. "Why don't you charge for this?" Billy asked one night, washing dishes while Danny cooked. "You could make a fortune." "My mom never charged people who were hungry," Danny said simply. "She fed folks because that's what you do. You share what you have." One evening, 6 months after returning, Danny's workstation lit up with an incoming transmission. Lyra's face appeared, smiling. "I hear you're running an unlicensed restaurant out of your repair shop," she said, pretending to be stern. "It's not a restaurant. It's just dinner. You have 43 people waiting outside your door right now. I can see them on the station's security feed." Danny glanced outside. She was right. The line had gotten longer lately. "Okay, it's a popular dinner." Lyra laughed. "I'm sending you something. A thank you. Don't argue." The next day, a cargo shipment arrived. Fresh ingredients, high quality, enough to feed 100 people. And a note, from the Valkyrie Empire, with gratitude. "May your kitchen never run empty." The deliveries kept coming. Every week, fresh supplies appeared. Danny tried to refuse them, but Lyra was stubborn. "You changed our entire civilization," she told him. "Let us feed your guests." Danny's dinner gatherings became a station institution. Species that normally didn't get along sat at the same table, sharing food, swapping stories. A KRYNN merchant taught a human pilot her language over bowls of chili. A Valkyrie family celebrated their daughter's birthday with Danny's chocolate cake, laughing and taking pictures. 1 year after returning, Danny stood in his workshop on a Friday evening, stirring a pot of his mom's stew. Billy was chopping vegetables. Outside, the usual crowd was gathering, chatting and laughing while they waited. A young Valkyrie girl, maybe 10 years old in human years, peeked through the door. "Mr. Danny? My mom wants to know if you're teaching tonight." Danny had started doing that sometimes. Quick lessons. How to make soup. How to bake bread. How to cook with love instead of measurements. "Sure, kid. You want to learn?" Her face lit up. "Yes. Can you teach me the stew? I want to make it for my grandmother. She's sick, and she says your food makes her feel better." Danny handed her an apron. Alright, first thing you need to know. This recipe isn't about ingredients. It's about patience and heart. You can't rush it. You can't fake it. You gotta mean it. She nodded seriously, like he was teaching her the secrets of the universe. Maybe he was. Billy brought out plates and bowls. The crowd started filing in. Humans, Velkari, Kryn, Tharix, a dozen species that had nothing in common except hunger and curiosity. Danny watched them sit together, share food, become something more than strangers. This was it. This was what humanity brought to the galaxy. Not better weapons or faster ships. Not superior technology. The understanding that feeding someone was sacred. That a meal shared was a bond formed. That the simplest act of kindness could change everything. His mom would have loved this. Danny served the stew, moving from person to person, making sure everyone had enough. The young Velkari girl helped him, carefully carrying bowls, mimicking his movements. Outside, the station hummed with life. Ships docked and departed. Traders argued over prices. The galaxy spun on, vast and complicated and often harsh. But in this small workshop, over bowls of homemade stew, the universe felt a little warmer. A little kinder. A little more like home. And that, Danny thought, was worth more than all the technology in the galaxy.